The emergency beacon pierced through the static on Dr. Sarah Chen's medical scanner like a knife cutting through silence. She paused in her routine maintenance of the orbital research station's medical bay, her dark eyes narrowing as she studied the weak signal emanating from the planet's surface below. "Computer, analyze the source of that distress signal," she commanded, her voice steady despite the unusual nature of the transmission. The station's artificial intelligence hummed to life. "Signal originates from the southern continent's jungle region. Biological markers indicate a large life form in severe distress. Warning, area designated as hostile territory by Galactic Council." Sarah frowned as she pulled up the planetary survey data on her holographic display. Kepler 442b had been marked as a quarantine zone for the past 3 years after first contact with a native species had gone horribly wrong. The feline-like beings called the Vashti had initially seemed peaceful, but territorial disputes had escalated into violence. Now, standing orders prohibited any contact with the surface. But someone or something was dying down there. The signal pulsed again, weaker this time. Sarah's medical training overrode her caution as she recognized the pattern. Whatever was sending that beacon was in the final stages of systemic organ failure. Her fingers moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency, breaking every regulation in her handbook as she prepared for an unauthorized descent. "Dr. Chun, I must remind you that Protocol 7 explicitly forbids," the computer began. "Override authorization Chun 7 Alpha," Sarah interrupted, already suiting up in her environmental gear. "Medical emergency takes precedence over diplomatic protocols." The descent pod hummed as it detached from the station, carrying Sarah through the planet's thick atmosphere toward the jungle below. Through the viewport, she could see the massive trees that stretched like green towers toward the sky, their canopy so dense it blocked most sunlight from reaching the forest floor. As the pod touched down in a small clearing, Sarah's scanner immediately lit up with biological readings. The air was thick and humid, filled with the calls of unseen creatures. But the distress beacon was close, perhaps 50 meters northeast through the underbrush. Sarah moved carefully through the alien vegetation, her medical kit secured to her back, and a portable scanner in her hand. The readings grew stronger with each step until she pushed through a curtain of hanging vines and stopped dead in her tracks. Before her lay a creature unlike anything she had ever seen, yet somehow familiar. It resembled a massive cat, easily the size of a small vehicle, with deep blue fur marked by silver stripes that seemed to shimmer in the filtered light. Its face was more refined than any Earth feline, with intelligent amber eyes that tracked her movement despite obvious pain. But it was the creature's condition that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. Dozens of thick, rope-like parasites had burrowed into the being's skin, their segmented bodies pulsing with a sickening rhythm as they drained their host's life force. The Vashti's breathing was labored, and its body trembled with each heartbeat. Sarah activated her universal translator as she slowly approached. "I'm a doctor," she said softly, keeping her hands visible and her movements non-threatening. "I want to help you." The creature's eyes widened, and when it spoke, its voice was a deep rumble filled with pain and surprise. "Human, you should not be here. Your kind forbidden." "My kind believes in saving lives," Sarah replied, kneeling just out of reach and opening her medical scanner. "These parasites, how long have they been attached?" "7 cycles of the sun," the Vashti whispered. "They found me during the hunt. My pride, they could not risk the contamination. They left me to die with honor." Sarah's scanner revealed the horrifying truth. The parasites weren't just feeding on the creature's blood, they were rewriting its cellular structure, turning the Vashti's own body against itself. Each parasite was essentially a living biological weapon, designed to ensure its host's death while reproducing in the most painful way possible. "What's your name?" Sarah asked as she began pulling medical supplies from her kit. "Kethvar of the Northern Pride," the creature replied, then added with what might have been bitter amusement, "though I am prideless now. The contaminated cannot return home." "Well, Kethvar, I'm Dr. Sarah Chun, and I didn't come this far to watch you die. Sarah activated her medical laser and began sterilizing her instruments. These parasites, they're not just feeding on you. They're transforming your cellular structure. But I think I can reverse the process. Kethvar's amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that was both hopeful and skeptical. Your medical knowledge, it extends to our physiology? Life is life, Sarah said simply. The basic principles remain the same across species. Plus, I've studied every xenobiology report the Council ever filed on your people. As Sarah worked, she explained her plan. The parasites had created a complex network within Kethvar's body, but they had a weakness. They required a specific protein sequence to maintain their hold on their host. By introducing a synthetic blocker into Kethvar's bloodstream, she could essentially starve the parasites while allowing his natural healing to reverse their damage. This will hurt, she warned as she prepared the injection. The parasites will fight the treatment. Pain I can endure, Kethvar replied. It is the emptiness of death I fear. Sarah administered the treatment and immediately began the delicate process of parasite removal. Each one had to be extracted carefully to prevent leaving behind fragments that could regenerate. It was painstaking work, made more difficult by the alien physiology and the parasite's defensive mechanisms. As she worked, Kethvar spoke of his life. He was a scout for his pride, responsible for monitoring the borders of their territory. The parasites had been waiting in ambush, a trap set by a rival pride that had discovered the creatures in the deep caves. Biological warfare was apparently not unknown among the Vashti. Your people, Kethvar said during a brief rest between procedures, they fear us because we are different, because we do not think as you think. Sarah paused in her work. Actually, I think they fear you because you're better than us at some things. Your strength, your speed, your natural unity. Humans don't handle feeling inferior very well. Yet you risk everything to save one of us. That's what humans do best, Sarah replied with a small smile. We're contrary that way. Hours passed as Sarah continued the treatment. The portable medical unit she had brought was pushed to its limits, but slowly, steadily, Kethvar's vital signs began to improve. The silver stripes in his fur grew brighter, and his breathing became less labored. As the last parasite was removed and properly contained for study, Sarah administered a final dose of healing accelerant. That should do it. You'll need rest, but the cellular damage is already reversing itself. Kethvar attempted to rise, his massive frame unsteady but determined. I owe you a life debt, Dr. Sarachan. My people will hear of this, regardless of the consequences. The only debt you owe is to get better and live a good life, Sarah replied, already packing her equipment. But I do have one request. Anything. Help me understand why first contact went wrong. Maybe we can prevent it from happening again. Kethvar's expression grew thoughtful. Your diplomats, they approached our leaders as if we were simple beasts to be negotiated with. They did not understand that among the Vashti, trust is earned through action, not words. You have shown me the true nature of humanity today. Perhaps there is hope for both our peoples yet. As Sarah prepared for her return journey to the orbital station, she knew she would face serious consequences for her unauthorized mission. But looking at Kethvar, now standing tall and proud despite his ordeal, she felt no regret. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the legal choice. Sometimes being human meant being more than human. The jungle around them had grown quiet, as if the very forest was holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next from this unprecedented meeting between two species that had been taught to see each other as enemies. Sarah's scanner chimed softly, indicating that her return pod was ready for pickup. As she looked one last time at the magnificent being she had saved, she realized that this was just the beginning. The real challenge would be convincing two worlds that peace was not only possible, but necessary. Until we meet again, Kethvar said, bowing his great head in a gesture of respect. Until we meet again, Sarah replied, already wondering if that meeting would come as friends or as representatives of warring worlds. The future hung in the balance, suspended between fear and hope between the old ways of thinking and the possibility of something entirely new. The disciplinary hearing was exactly as brutal as Sarah had expected. Admiral Morrison sat at the head of the tribunal table, his weathered face carved from stone as he reviewed the charges against her. To his left sat Director Yamamoto from the Xenobiology Department, and to his right, Ambassador Collins from the Diplomatic Corps. Dr. Chun, Admiral Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of military authority. You stand accused of violating Protocol 7, unauthorized surface contact, breach of quarantine procedures, and engaging in first contact without diplomatic clearance. How do you plead? Sarah stood at attention in her dress uniform, the small container holding the extracted parasites secured in her briefcase. Guilty to all charges, sir, but I request permission to present evidence that may be relevant to the tribunal's decision. Ambassador Collins leaned forward, his political instincts clearly triggered. Dr. Chun, nothing you discovered during your unauthorized mission can justify the risk you've exposed us all to. The Vashti have made their position clear. They consider human presence an act of war. With respect, sir, I believe my findings suggest otherwise. Sarah opened her briefcase and activated a holographic projector. The parasites I removed from the Vashti were not naturally occurring. The hologram showed detailed scans of the creatures Sarah had extracted. Their segmented bodies pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, and genetic markers highlighted in red showed clear signs of artificial enhancement. Director Yamamoto leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic concerns. These readings, they show engineered biological components. Someone created these things. Not someone, Sarah corrected. Something. The genetic markers match samples we collected from the abandoned research station on Titan 7. The ones we found after the Erebus Collective disappeared. A cold silence filled the room. The Erebus Collective had been humanity's most secretive research group, focused on biological weapons development. Their disappearance 3 years ago had coincided with the collapse of first contact with the Vashti. Admiral Morrison's expression darkened. Are you suggesting the Erebus Collective deliberately sabotaged first contact? I'm suggesting they used the Vashti as test subjects, Sarah replied grimly. The individual I treated, Kethvar, was infected during what he described as an ambush by a rival pride. But the infection pattern suggests the parasites were deployed strategically, targeting specific individuals to create maximum social disruption. Sarah manipulated the hologram to show the parasite's life cycle. These organisms are designed to be highly contagious in the early stages, then become deadly to the host while remaining dormant in anyone exposed to them. In a pride-based society like the Vashti, this would force them to abandon infected members to prevent total contamination. Breaking their social structure, Director Yamamoto murmured. Brilliant and horrific, but why target the Vashti? Ambassador Collins asked. Sarah pulled up another display, this one showing Kepler 442b's resource surveys. Quantum crystals. The planet's core is rich with them, enough to power our entire fleet for centuries. But the Vashti control access to the major deposits. Admiral Morrison rubbed his temples, the political implications becoming clear. So the Erebus Collective started a biological war to drive the Vashti away from their own resources. And when first contact failed, they blamed it on natural cultural incompatibility, Sarah continued. But Kethvar told me something important. Vashti society is based on trust earned through action, not words. Our diplomats tried to negotiate without understanding this fundamental principle. What are you proposing, Doctor? Admiral Morrison asked. I propose we return to the planet, not as conquerors or negotiators, but as healers. The parasites are still active in the Vashti population. I've developed a treatment, but it needs to be distributed quickly before the contamination spreads further. Ambassador Collins shook his head. It's too dangerous. Even if your theory about the Erebus Collective is correct, the Vashti still see us as enemies. They'll attack any human ship that approaches. Not if I go alone, Sarah said quietly. Kethvar owes me a life debt. In Vashti culture, that creates a bond of trust that can be extended to others. Director Yamamoto pulled up Kethvar's medical readings from Sarah's scanner. His recovery rate was remarkable. Complete cellular regeneration in under 6 hours. If we could establish a medical exchange program, you're talking about turning a military situation into a humanitarian mission, Admiral Morrison said slowly. The Council won't approve it. Then, we don't ask for approval, Sarah replied. We act on medical authority. There's a plague spreading through an intelligent species, and we have a cure. Under galactic medical protocol that supersedes political considerations. The room fell silent as the tribunal considered her words. Sarah knew she was asking them to risk their careers, just as she had risked hers by saving Kethvar. But sometimes being human meant taking risks that logic said were foolish, but conscience demanded were necessary. Admiral Morrison finally spoke. Dr. Chun, if we approve this mission, you understand there will be no backup? No military support? If things go wrong, you'll be on your own. I understand, sir. And you still want to proceed? Sarah thought about Kethvar, lying helpless in the jungle while parasites slowly killed him. She thought about the other Vashti who might be suffering the same fate, abandoned by their own people to prevent the spread of an engineered plague. She thought about the fear and mistrust that had poisoned relations between two species who might otherwise have been allies. Yes, sir. Ido. Director Yamamoto was already pulling up technical specifications. You'll need a larger medical facility than what you carried before. I can modify a Class 3 medical pod with extended range scanners and a full biological laboratory. And you'll need a way to communicate your intentions clearly, Ambassador Collins added reluctantly. I can provide you with a more sophisticated translation matrix, one that includes cultural context markers. Admiral Morrison stood, his decision made. Very well, Dr. Chun. You have 72 hours to prepare. But understand this, your mission is purely medical. You are not representing humanity in any diplomatic capacity. You are a doctor treating patients, nothing more. Understood, sir. As the tribunal dismissed, Sarah felt the weight of what she was undertaking settle on her shoulders. She wasn't just risking her own life anymore. She was potentially risking the future relationship between two species. But she also knew that without trust, there could be no future worth having. That evening, as Sarah worked in the medical bay preparing her equipment, she received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Morrison appeared in the doorway, no longer wearing his official demeanor. Doctor, may I speak freely? Of course, sir. My daughter serves on a science vessel near the Andromeda border. Last year, they encountered a species we'd never seen before, crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic resonance. When first contact protocols failed and things started to go wrong, do you know what saved the situation? Sarah shook her head. A young engineer who ignored orders and fixed their damaged ship. One act of genuine help did more for interspecies relations than months of formal negotiations. Morrison moved to the viewport, looking down at the planet below. The Vashti aren't the enemy, are they, Doctor? No, sir. They're victims. Just like we were when the Erebus Collective disappeared and left us to deal with the consequences of their experiments. Then, go save them, Morrison said simply, and maybe save us all in the process. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah studied Vashti physiology until she could recite their cellular structure from memory. She loaded the medical pod with every piece of equipment she might need, and several things she hoped she wouldn't. Most importantly, she prepared enough anti-parasite treatment to help dozens of infected individuals. As the countdown to departure began, Sarah stood before the viewport one last time, looking down at the green world below. Somewhere in those forests, Kethvar was recovering from his ordeal, possibly telling others about the human doctor who had saved his life. Whether that story would help her mission or make her a target remained to be seen. The medical pod detached from the orbital station with barely a whisper, beginning its descent toward the unknown. Sarah checked her equipment one final time and activated the communication array. This is Dr. Sarah Chun to any Vashti receiving this transmission. I am returning to your world not as a representative of the human government, but as a healer. I have medicine for the parasite plague, and I'm coming to help anyone who needs treatment. She transmitted the message on all frequencies as the pod pierced the atmosphere, hoping that somewhere below, ears were listening and hearts were willing to trust. The real test of humanity was about to begin. The medical pod touched down in the same clearing where Sarah had first encountered Kethvar, but this time she wasn't alone. As the hatch hissed open, she could see movement in the tree-line, shadows that moved with predatory grace. The Vashti were watching. Sarah stepped out slowly, her hands clearly visible and her medical kit prominently displayed. The universal translator hummed to life as she spoke into the thick jungle air. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chun. I've returned with medicine for those suffering from the parasite infection." A rustle in the underbrush preceded the emergence of 3 Vashti warriors. They were magnificent creatures, each standing over 2 meters tall with the fluid grace of natural hunters. Their fur ranged from deep amber to midnight black, marked with the ritual scars that indicated their rank within the pride structure. The largest of the 3, a female with silver-tipped ears and intelligent green eyes, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of command. "I am Esiketera, Pride Mother of the Northern Clan. Kethvar has told us of your intervention. You claim to bring healing." "I do," Sarah replied, opening her medical kit to show the vials of anti-parasite serum. "But first, I need to know how many of your people are infected." Esiketera's expression darkened. 17 for my pride alone. 3 other clans have reported similar numbers. The contamination spreads like shadow fire, forcing us to abandon our own kin. Sarah's heart sank. Over 60 infected individuals, possibly more if other prides hadn't reported in. Her supply of serum would help, but she needed to synthesize more on-site. "Where are the infected being held?" "The mourning grounds," one of the other warriors said, his voice heavy with grief. "Where we take our dead to return their spirits to the earth." "It is fitting." "They're not dead yet," Sarah said firmly, "and I intend to keep it that way. But I'll need access to your healers and any medical knowledge your people have about these parasites." Esiketera studied Sarah for a long moment. "You would work alongside our medicine keepers?" "As equals, if they'll have me. Healing isn't about who knows more. It's about sharing knowledge to save lives." A new voice interrupted them from the forest edge. "Then, you're not like the other humans who came before." Sarah turned to see Kethvar emerge from the shadows, his blue fur gleaming with health, the silver stripes bright and strong. He moved with renewed vigor, though she could see small scars where the parasites had been attached. "Kethvar!" Sarah couldn't hide her relief at seeing him fully recovered. "You look alive," he finished with what might have been amusement. "Thanks to your skill and courage. I have told my pride mother of what you did, but she needed to see for herself that you were different from those who came before." Sektara nodded slowly. "Our experience with humans has been problematic. Your diplomats spoke many words, but understood little. When the sickness began to spread, they withdrew rather than help. We assumed it was because they saw us as mere beasts." Sarah felt a flash of anger at her own species' failure. Some humans are afraid of what they don't understand, but others believe that all life has value, regardless of form. "I'm here because I believe your people deserve the same medical care I would give my own species." "Then, come," Situra said, turning toward the forest depths. "Meet our healers and see the scope of what we face." The journey to the mourning grounds took them deep into Vashti territory, through forests so dense that sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. Sarah marveled at the natural architecture around them, where massive trees had been carefully cultivated to form living bridges and platforms. The Vashti lived in harmony with their environment in ways that human colonies had never achieved. Along the way, Kethvar explained the social structure that the parasites had so effectively disrupted. Vashti society was built on interconnected prides, each specializing in different aspects of survival. Hunters, crafters, healers, scouts, and leaders all worked together in complex webs of cooperation and mutual support. When one becomes contaminated, they must be isolated to protect the whole, Kethvar explained. But isolation means certain death, because our healing practices require the presence of the pride's bond energy. Bond energy? Sarah asked. It is difficult to translate, Esikatera said. Your science might call it bioelectric field resonance. Our healers can enhance natural healing through shared life force, but only within the pride structure. Sarah's mind raced as she considered the implications. If Vashti healing relied on bioelectric fields generated by group proximity, then isolation would indeed be a death sentence for infected individuals. The parasites weren't just killing their hosts. They were destroying the very social bonds that made Vashti healing possible. They reached the mourning grounds as the day was fading. Sarah had expected something somber and depressing, but instead found herself in a place of unexpected beauty. Ancient trees formed natural cathedral spaces where shafts of golden light illuminated carved stone memorials. But it was the sight of the infected Vashti that broke her heart. 17 individuals lay on raised platforms carved from living wood, their breathing labored, their once magnificent fur dulled by sickness. Each was surrounded by the same rope-like parasites Sarah had removed from Kethvar, but these infections were more advanced. Some of the creatures could barely lift their heads as the approaching group arrived. An elderly Vashti with pure white fur and clouded eyes approached them. Despite her obvious age, she moved with dignity and purpose. I am Miriseth, keeper of the healing ways, she said, her voice musical despite her distress. Kethvar has told me of your medicine skills. Can you truly help them? Sarah knelt beside the nearest patient, a young Vashti whose breathing was so shallow it barely moved his chest. Her scanner revealed the same cellular degradation she had seen in Kethvar, but far more advanced. I can help, Sarah said, but I'll need to work quickly. The cellular damage is extensive, and I don't have enough serum prepared for all of them. What do you need? Miriseth asked immediately. I need your knowledge of Vashti physiology, access to your healing practices, and a laboratory where I can synthesize more medicine. Sarah looked up at the assembled healers. And I need you to trust me enough to let me try techniques that might seem strange to your traditions. Miriseth studied Sarah's face for a long moment. Show me what you did for Kethvar. Working together, Sarah and the Vashti healers began treating the most critical patients first. To Sarah's amazement, Miriseth's knowledge of Vashti biology far exceeded the data in human medical databases. The elderly healer understood the relationship between cellular structure and bioelectric fields in ways that human science was only beginning to discover. Your serum interrupts the parasite's control of cellular function, Miriseth observed as they worked on the third patient. But the healing process could be accelerated if we could restore the bond energy connection. Can that be done without risking contamination of the healthy Pride members? Miriseth's eyes gleamed with an idea. Perhaps if we create an artificial Pride bond. Kethvar is immune now, yes? And you've shown that your healing energy is compatible with ours. Sarah wasn't sure exactly what the healer was proposing, but she was willing to try anything that might save lives. What do you need me to do? The process that followed was unlike anything in Sarah's medical training. As she administered the anti-parasite serum, Miriseth and Kethvar positioned themselves around each patient in specific patterns. The elderly healer began to sing, a deep harmonic sound that seemed to resonate in Sarah's bones. To her amazement, her scanner showed that the bioelectric fields around infected Vashti were indeed strengthening. The combination of human medicine and Vashti healing techniques was accelerating recovery beyond what either approach could achieve alone. Your life energy, Miriseth said during a brief rest between patients, it resonates at a frequency compatible with ours. This is highly unusual between species. Maybe it's not so unusual, Sarah replied, thinking of the interconnected nature of all life. Maybe the barriers between species exist more in our minds than in our biology. They worked through the night, combining human medical technology with ancient Vashti healing wisdom. As dawn broke over the morning grounds, all 17 infected individuals were breathing easily, their fur regaining its natural luster as the parasite's hold was broken. But as they celebrated this victory, HFY brought sobering news. Scouts report that the Crimson Pride has 37 infected members, and the mountain clans refuse to acknowledge that a cure exists. Sarah realized that her work was just beginning. Saving lives was only the first step in healing the wounds between species. Now she had to prove that humans and Vashti could work together as equals, sharing knowledge and resources for the benefit of all. Then, we take the cure to them, Sarah said simply. And we show them that healing knows no boundaries between peoples. SEK Terra's eyes showed both admiration and concern. The mountain clans have long memories, human healer. They remember the first humans who came with promises of friendship, but brought only sorrow. Convincing them will not be easy. Then, we don't try to convince them with words, Sarah replied, echoing HFY's earlier lesson about Vashti culture. We convince them with actions. We heal their people, and we let that speak for itself. As the rescued Vashti began to stir from their healing sleep, Sarah knew that the most difficult part of her mission still lay ahead. But looking at the faces around her, both human and Vashti, united in their commitment to preserving life, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps trust really could be earned through action. Perhaps two species that had been taught to fear each other could learn to see their common ground instead. The real test of that hope was waiting in the mountain territories ahead. The mountain paths leading to the Crimson Pride territory were treacherous, carved into cliff faces that dropped away into misty valleys thousands of meters below. Sarah's modified medical pod could have made the journey in minutes, but SEK Terra had insisted they travel on foot. The mountain clans see flying machines as signs of aggression, she explained as they navigated a particularly narrow ledge. Your people's first contact involved ships descending from the sky like metal predators. Sarah adjusted her pack, heavy with medical supplies and portable synthesis equipment. Behind her, HFY moved with the natural grace of his species, seemingly unaffected by the altitude that was beginning to make her lightheaded. Miraseth, despite her advanced age, kept pace with them all. "Tell me about the Crimson Pride," Sarah said as they paused to rest in the shelter of an overhanging rock. "They are the oldest of our people," Miraseth replied, her white fur ruffled by the mountain wind. "Their bloodlines trace back to the first awakening, when consciousness first sparked in our species. They see themselves as guardians of our pure traditions, which means they view any outside influence as contamination," HFY added grimly. Even before the sickness, they were suspicious of change. Now, with their people dying, they'll blame humans for the plague, Sarah finished. And they won't be entirely wrong. The truth of the Erebus Collective's involvement had been weighing on Sarah's mind since leaving the orbital station. Even if her own people hadn't directly created the parasites, human ambition and human weapons had been used against the Vashti. The moral debt ran deeper than any individual guilt. As they climbed higher, the vegetation changed from dense forest to hardy mountain shrubs adapted to the thin air. Ancient carved markers began to appear along the path, warnings written in the flowing script of Old Vashti. "What do they say?" Sarah asked. "Siktara translated grimly. Turn back, Skyborn. Your poison has no place in sacred lands." "Cheerful," Sarah muttered, but pressed on. The Crimson Pride's settlement appeared suddenly as they crested a ridge, emerging from the rock face like a natural growth of the mountain itself. Unlike the forest dwellings of the northern clan, these structures were carved directly into the living stone, their entrances flanked by massive statues of ancient Vashti ancestors. But it was the smell that hit Sarah first. The sweet, sickly odor of advanced parasite infection hung heavy in the mountain air. Her medical scanner confirmed what her nose already told her. The contamination here was far worse than anything they had seen in the forest. 53 life signs in critical condition, she reported quietly. "How long has this been going on?" "Nearly 2 moon cycles," Miraseth said, her voice heavy with sorrow. By the time messengers reached us with word of the cure, Pride leader Korthak had forbidden any contact with outsiders. Before they could advance further, a group of Crimson Pride warriors emerged from concealed positions in the rocks. These Vashti were different from those Sarah had met before. Where the forest dwellers had been graceful and fluid, these mountain warriors were solid and imposing, their red and gold fur marked with ritual scars that spoke of countless battles. The largest of them, a massive male with one scarred eye, stepped forward with obvious hostility. SEK Terra of the Northern Clan, you shame yourself by bringing the sky poison to our sacred lands. Grektar, SEK Terra replied formally. I bring a healer who has cured our people of the contamination. She offers the same gift to the Crimson Pride. Grektar's one good, I fixed on Sarah with undisguised hatred. This small human claims to heal what her own kind created. We have seen the true nature of humanity. They speak of friendship while poisoning our young. Sarah stepped forward, forcing herself to remain calm despite the warrior's intimidating presence. You're right to distrust humans. Some of my people did create these parasites, and for that I am truly sorry. But I'm not here as a representative of humanity. I'm here as a doctor, sworn to preserve life regardless of species. Pretty words, Grektar snarled. But words are wind. Your kind spoke of cooperation when first they came to our world, yet brought only suffering. Then, don't listen to my words, Sarah said, opening her medical kit. Let me show you what I can do. The standoff might have continued, but a new voice interrupted from the settlement entrance. An elderly female Vashti emerged, her once magnificent red fur now patchy and dull. She moved with obvious pain, and Sarah's scanner immediately detected the telltale signs of parasite infection. Enough, Grektar, the newcomer said, her voice carrying absolute authority despite her obvious illness. I am Yethera, Pride Mother of the Crimson Clan. Healer Sarah Chun, approach. Sarah exchanged glances with SEK Terra, surprised that the Mountain Pride Mother knew her name. Your reputation precedes you, young healer, Yethera continued as Sarah drew near. Kethvar's recovery has been spoken of by every messenger bird and wandering scout. But reputation is not proof. What proof would you accept? Sarah asked. Yethera gestured to her own infected form. Heal me, here now before all witness. If your medicine truly works, if you are not some elaborate deception, prove it on one who has already accepted death. The gathering crowd of Crimson Pride members murmured at this pronouncement. Sarah could see the logic in it from their perspective, but also the trap. If she failed, if Yethera's infection was too advanced, the failure would condemn not only Sarah, but potentially all future cooperation between the species. The infection is very advanced, Sarah said carefully. The success rate decreases significantly once cellular degradation reaches. Are you refusing? Grektar interrupted, his hand moving to the ceremonial blade at his side. No, Sarah said firmly. I'm explaining the risks, so there's no misunderstanding. Pride Mother Yethera, if you're willing to trust me, I'll do everything in my power to save your life. Sarah began setting up her portable medical station, while Miriseth explained the treatment process to the assembled Crimson Pride healers. The Mountain Clan's medicine keepers were more traditional than their forest counterparts, relying on herbal remedies and ritual healing rather than the bioelectric technique Sarah had learned to work with. The healing songs of the mountains are different, Miriseth explained quietly as Sarah prepared the anti-parasite serum. Deeper, more connected to the earth itself. But the principles are the same. As Sarah began the treatment, she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. Every movement was scrutinized, every breath analyzed for signs of deception or failure. The pressure was unlike anything she had experienced in her medical career. The parasites in Yethera's system were deeply entrenched, their root systems extending throughout her nervous system like malevolent vines. Sarah had to work more slowly and carefully than ever before, removing each organism piece by piece while monitoring the Pride Mother's vital signs. Hours passed. The mountain healers began their low, rumbling songs, harmonies that seemed to resonate through the stone itself. To Sarah's amazement, the music appeared to strengthen Euthura's cellular response to treatment, much as the forest dwellers' techniques had done. Your healing energy, one of the mountain healers observed, it flows like mountain water, steady and persistent. This is not the chaotic energy signature we detected from the first humans. Maybe because I'm not trying to take anything from you, Sarah replied, carefully extracting another parasite. I'm only trying to give back some of what my species took away. As the treatment progressed, Sarah began to understand something crucial about Vashti society. Each clan had developed healing techniques adapted to their environment, but all were based on the same fundamental principle of shared life energy. The forest dwellers used bioelectric resonance. The mountain clans used harmonic stone resonance, but the underlying concept was identical. You could teach human medicine so much, Sarah said to Miraseth during a brief rest. The integration of group healing with individual treatment, the use of environmental resonance to amplify natural recovery processes. And your medicine could help us understand the deeper mechanisms of what we do by instinct, the elderly healer replied. Perhaps healing was always meant to be a bridge between peoples. The final parasite was removed as the mountain sun reached its zenith. Sarah administered the last dose of regenerative stimulant and stepped back, exhausted but hopeful. Yethera's vital signs were strengthening, her breathing becoming less labored. The Pride Mother opened her eyes, now clear and bright instead of clouded with pain. She sat up slowly, testing her strength, then rose to her full height with growing confidence. The poison is gone, she announced to the assembled crowd. The human healer speaks truth through action. A cheer went up from the Crimson Pride members, but Grektar stepped forward with suspicion still evident. One healing does not erase the greater harm, he said. What are the others? What are the dozens who still suffer? Then we heal them all, Sarah said simply. Every single one, if you'll let me. Yethera studied Sarah with newfound respect. And what do you ask in return for this gift of life? Nothing, Sarah replied. This is what healers do. But if your people are willing, I'd like to learn from your medicine keepers. And perhaps when this crisis has passed, we could explore whether humans and Vashti might work together instead of fearing each other. You would share your knowledge freely? Healing belongs to everyone, Sarah said. Disease doesn't care about species boundaries, and neither should the cure. Yethera looked around at her people, reading something in their expressions that Sarah couldn't interpret. Finally, she nodded slowly. Very well, Dr. Sarah-chan. You may treat our sick. But know this, if even one of my people dies from your intervention, you will answer to mountain justice. Understood, Sarah said, already unpacking her equipment to begin synthesizing more serum. As she worked, she noticed something remarkable happening around her. Crimson Pride healers began approaching, offering assistance, and asking questions about her techniques. The barrier of distrust was beginning to crack, replaced by the universal desire to ease suffering and preserve life. Kethvar appeared at her side as she set up the synthesis chamber. You realize what you've done here? Hopefully save some lives, Sarah replied. More than that, you've proven that trust can exist between our peoples. The mountain clans have never accepted outsiders before, but they're accepting you. Sarah looked around at the mixed group of human and Vashti healers working together to prepare treatment for the infected. Maybe that's because I'm not really an outsider anymore. Maybe when you commit to helping someone, regardless of species, you become part of something bigger. Something bigger, Kethvar mused. Yes, I think the humans have a saying for that. What's that? Humanity. As the day progressed, Sarah began to understand that the word meant more than just a species designation. It was a choice, a way of being that transcended biological boundaries. And looking around at the Vashti who had chosen to trust her, she realized that humanity wasn't exclusively human at all. It was simply the decision to see the worth in all life and to act on that recognition regardless of the cost. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed medical station orbiting Kepler, 442b. The facility was a marvel of integrated design, combining human technology with Vashti architectural principles. Flowing organic curves melded seamlessly with functional medical equipment, creating healing spaces that felt alive rather than sterile. Through the viewport, she could see the daily shuttle traffic between the station and the planet below. Vashti healers came to learn human medical techniques, while human doctors descended to study indigenous healing practices. The exchange had proven beneficial beyond anyone's initial hopes. Dr. Chun to Medical Bay 7. Came Kethvar's voice over the communication system. "We have an interesting case for you." Sarah smiled as she made her way through the station corridors. Kethvar had become the liaison between human and Vashti medical teams, his unique experience as the first successful interspecies treatment, making him invaluable in bridging cultural gaps. She found him in one of the hybrid operating theaters, standing beside a treatment table where a young Vashti lay unconscious. But this wasn't a parasite case. Sarah's scanner showed complex fractures and internal injuries consistent with a serious accident. "Hunting mishap," Kethvar explained as Miriseth approached from the other side of the table. "Fell into a canyon while pursuing prey. Normal Vashti healing can't repair this kind of damage, and she's too young for the bond energy techniques to work effectively. But human bone regeneration therapy might save her," Miriseth added, "if we can adapt it to Vashti physiology." Sarah studied the readings carefully. The young female couldn't be more than the Vashti equivalent of 16 years old. In human terms, her bones were still developing, which actually made regenerative therapy more viable. "What's her name?" Sarah asked as she began preparing the treatment. "Zilnara," Kethvar said softly. "She's from one of the outer settlements, the ones that haven't fully accepted the new cooperation accords." Sarah understood the implications. If they saved this girl using human medical technology, it would demonstrate the value of interspecies cooperation to communities that still harbor distrust. If they failed, her parents? Sarah asked. Waiting in the family quarters, Miriseth replied. They were reluctant to bring her here. Only the severity of her injuries convinced them. As Sarah worked, she reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate mission to save Kethvar. The parasite crisis had been resolved completely, with the last infected individuals recovered nearly 2 months ago. But the real victory had been the gradual building of trust between the two species. The revelation about the Erebus Collective had helped significantly. When the Galactic Council finally received Sarah's evidence about the engineered parasites, the investigation had uncovered the full scope of the conspiracy. The Erebus Collective hadn't just targeted the Vashti. They had been conducting illegal biological weapons research across multiple systems. Admiral Morrison's voice had carried grim satisfaction when he delivered the news. The Erebus leaders have been arrested, their research facilities shut down, and their victims will receive full reparations. Your medical diplomacy, Dr. Chun, prevented a galaxy-wide biological warfare incident. But Sarah's greatest satisfaction came from moments like this, watching human and Vashti healers work together as equals, sharing knowledge that benefited everyone. The bone regeneration therapy took 6 hours to complete. Sarah and Miriseth worked in perfect synchronization, combining human stem cell technology with Vashti healing harmonics to accelerate the young female's recovery. By the time they finished, Zilnara's broken bones were knitting together at a rate that amazed even Sarah. The integration of our techniques grows more sophisticated each time, Miriseth observed as they monitored the patient's progress. It's as if our medical knowledge was always meant to be combined. Maybe it was, Sarah replied. Maybe the universe intended for species to find each other and share their gifts. 2 hours later, Zilnara opened her amber eyes and immediately tried to sit up, only to be gently restrained by Kethvar. Easy, young hunter, he said with amusement. Your bones are still rebuilding themselves. What happened? Zilnara asked, confusion evident in her musical voice. I remember falling, then darkness. You were hurt badly, Sarah explained, activating the universal translator. We used a combination of human and Vashti medicine to heal you. Zilnara's eyes widened as she noticed Sarah for the first time. "You're human." "Yes, I'm Dr. Sarachen." The young Vashti studied Sarah with curiosity rather than fear. "My parents always said humans were dangerous. But you healed me." "That's what doctors do," Sarah said simply. "We heal anyone who needs healing." "But why? I'm not your people." Sarah considered the question, thinking back to her first encounter with Kethvar. "Because life is precious, regardless of what form it takes. Because every being deserves the chance to grow up, to find their purpose, to contribute something meaningful to the universe." Zilnara's parents arrived an hour later, their relief at seeing their daughter conscious and alert overriding any cultural prejudices they might have harbored. Sarah watched as Miraseth explained the treatment process to them, emphasizing how human and Vashti techniques had worked together to save their child. "Is it true," Zilnara's father asked hesitantly, "that humans seek no payment for this healing?" "It's true," Sarah confirmed. "We ask only that you consider the possibility that our two peoples might have more in common than we have differences." That evening, Sarah found herself in the station's observation lounge, sharing a meal with an increasingly common sight, a mixed group of humans and Vashti discussing everything from medical techniques to philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness. Esikatura sat beside her, the Pride Mother having become one of the strongest advocates for interspecies cooperation. "I've received word from the Council of Clans," she said quietly. "They're prepared to offer humanity formal diplomatic recognition." Sarah nearly choked on her drink. "Seriously? Your actions have proven that humans can be trusted. More than that, they've proven that we're stronger together than apart." The vote was unanimous. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the communication screen as Sarah transmitted the news back to the orbital command station. His usual stern expression had been replaced by something approaching wonder. "Dr. Chun, do you understand what you've accomplished? Not only have you prevented an interstellar incident, you've created the first truly successful interspecies medical alliance in galactic history." "It wasn't just me, sir," Sarah replied. "It was everyone who chose cooperation over fear, healing over harm. Nevertheless, the Galactic Medical Council wants to offer you the position of Director of Interspecies Medical Relations. You'd be responsible for developing similar programs with other species across the galaxy." Sarah looked around the observation lounge at the humans and Vashti working together, learning from each other, building something neither species could have achieved alone. "With respect, sir, I prefer to stay here. There's still so much work to do." Admiral Morrison smiled, the first genuine smile she'd ever seen from him. "I thought you'd say that. In that case, the position is yours from here. Dr. Chun, you're now in charge of the galaxy's first interspecies medical research facility." Later that night, Sarah stood again at the observation deck, but this time she wasn't alone. Kethvar joined her, his blue fur gleaming in the starlight. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't answered that distress beacon?" he asked. "Every day," Sarah replied. "Two species that could have been allies, trapped in misunderstanding and fear. A biological weapon that could have spread to other worlds. The loss of all the knowledge we're sharing now." "But you did answer," Kethvar pointed out. "Despite the regulations, despite the risk, you chose to act." "Because that's what humans do at their best," Sarah said. "We see someone in need, and we help. We don't always think about the consequences or calculate the odds. We just act on the belief that every life matters. And that," said a new voice behind them, "is why our peoples will walk the stars together." They turned to see Yethera approaching, the former Crimson Pride Mother now serving as the Vashti representative on the station's governing council. "The mountain clans have sent word," she continued. "They want to contribute their stone resonance healing techniques to the research program. And the forest dwellers are offering to share their bioelectric knowledge." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she realized the full scope of what they had built. It had started with a single desperate rescue mission, but it had grown into something that could change the galaxy. Humans and Vashti working together, combining their strengths to heal not just individuals, but the wounds between entire civilizations. "You know what this means?" Kethvar asked. That we're not alone anymore, Sarah replied. None of us. Whatever challenges we face in the future, we'll face them together. As if to emphasize the point, a new shuttle appeared in the viewport, this one carrying crystalline researchers from the Andromeda border. Admiral Morrison's daughter had apparently been busy spreading word about the interspecies medical program, and now other species were requesting inclusion. Sarah smiled as she watched the shuttle dock. The universe was vast and full of unknowns, but tonight, at least, it felt a little less lonely. Healing, it seemed, really was the universal language. Come on, she said to her companions. We have new friends to welcome home. Together, Human and Vashti walked through the corridors of their shared future, ready to prove once again that the greatest strength of any species was not in what made them different, but in what they chose to do with those differences when the moment came to act. In the end, that was what it truly meant to be human. Not the species you belong to, but the choice to see the universe as a place worth healing, one life at a time.